As some of you guys know, I recently purchased this Range Rover Svr from Copart, bought as a complete non-runner. This made it easily the cheapest in the country, where I paid only £16,000 for it. Where similar ones go for around £35,000 here in the UK. When the car arrived, we diagnosed it to have timing chain issues and a seized engine. Since then, we have removed the engine from the car and stripped it down, where we found catastrophic damage. The block and the pistons were pretty much smashed up. Today, we rebuild the engine back up and assemble it with a new block, then attempt to start it for the first time.
Yes people, so today is a big day. We're going to assemble the Range Rover Svr engine back up. Here is the block. As you remember from part 2, when you stripped the engine down, the block was completely finished. Timing has jumped, hit the pistons blew up, and as a result, there's also engine damage on the liners and the block itself. It cannot be reused. If you come over here, if you look inside, that's where all the pistons go. As you know, it's a V8, that's why you got 8 cylinders altogether. And yeah, we're now going to start off by changing the main bearings, which is where the crankshaft is going to sit. Then we're going to assemble the conrods, the pistons. So we got a replacement piston over here. Original crankshaft. We took this to the machine shop to get it checked and polished. Absolutely fine on the bottom end, there was no damages. I've got a conrod and a piston. This goes onto the crankshaft, yeah? This is what a normal one looks like. And the one that came out of this engine came out looking like this. The piston basically smashed completely into pieces. That's why you can't see it. There's a gudgeon pin inside. If you look inside there, the gudgeon pin is what connects the conrod to the piston. Today, we're gonna now place the crankshaft in place, put on the main caps, torque it down to spec, then start putting the pistons and the conrods in and slowly start assembling the full engine. I'll give you guys a quick run through of all the parts that we're gonna install into this engine. So to start off with, we've got head bolts. I think it's about 20 of them. So this is what bolts the cylinder head to the engine block. And why do you get new bolts? Because the original ones are stretch bolts, which means they're one-time use only. We got timing chain tensioners and the timing chains as well. And again, with this stuff, you got genuine. Do not get aftermarket parts on them. Timing chain guides, got a few of them. Crankshaft seal, front and rear. We got 2 head gaskets. As you know, it's a V8. V8 means there's 2 cylinder heads, and that also means 2 head gaskets. We're now going to proceed with the engine building. First of all, starting with the crankshaft. Look at the size of this crankshaft. That's it. This is what a crank should look like when you place it in. Should be moving with no itches, nothing. Should be moving freely. So this is ready to have the main caps installed. So this here is the crankshaft main cap. As you can see, there's a bearing in there. There's a bearing underneath as well. There needs to be a bearing in both sides. And this runs across, so you got 2, 3, 4, 5. Altogether, there's 5 main caps. We're next going to torque these down to spec. So I'm not tightening it. I'm just lowering the bolts down to prepare us to torque it down. So this here is my torque wrench from Snap-on, and it's calibrated because it needs to be. When it comes to engine building, accuracy is very, very important. Using an aftermarket one, not even an aftermarket, but another brand that's not calibrated is going to give you problems. So these main bearings need to get torqued down to the correct specifications. If you come down here, you got M10 bolts and M8 bolts as well. Both have different settings on them. So what this torque wrench does is lets me know when it's exactly at the correct mark. Alright, so we're going to start off with the M10 bolts over here. So if you just watch what happens. Look at this light. So now we've done 25 Newton meters. The next one is 57 Newton meters. So it's a stage. We've done stage 1. Now we're doing stage 2. Same bolts, but more tighter. And what this sequence does is it makes sure that all the caps are being tightened in the correct way. So that's the second stage done. Now we're going to the third one. So before it was Newton meter, now we're going to change our settings to degrees. Do you know what I find crazy, yeah? Over here, it's like a block of metal, more metal, and it's like you put them together, put the ancillaries on, put it in, and it starts an engine and drives it. It's quite crazy, isn't it? And like, when it's here, you can't really think that this thing, when put together, will literally drive that machine right behind us. The SVR. Mad. So before we move on, I'm going to manually turn the engine just to make sure it's moving as it should. And you should do that as you move and build the engine up, just to make sure nothing is getting caught up in the process. And as you can see, very nice movement, which ensures that there's no faults on the crank or on the mains. All right, so that's all torqued up now. Now we're going to spin the engine over and get to the part where we start installing the pistons and the conrods onto the crankshaft. If you come down here, see these journals over here. Obviously now you can't see it, but there's journals over there as well. That's for the main caps. These journals are for the conrods. One side goes there and the cap goes on to secure it onto the crankshaft. And as you know, V8, 8 pistons, 8 rods. Let's spin this engine around. There you go. So now we're going to start dropping in the conrods with the pistons, which are attached together already. So this is what's going to go in now, piston and conrod. As you can see, you've got a bit of a half moon shape here. The reason for that is when it goes right at the bottom, this is the conrod cap. You'll meet it at the crankshaft, go together and bolt in to become a complete conrod. So let's start dropping them in. So this is a tool that allows us to compress the piston rings in place, which allows us to drop it in because the piston rings normally expand. So this holds it down to allow us to drop it into the bore. Here's the piston. We already installed a few others. I'm going to show you this one, as it's the same process for all of them anyway. So there's no point of showing you 8 pistons going in. This here is a piston ring compressor. As you can see, the pistons are hanging up. So what this does is put it over, and then with this tool, I'll tighten the compressor. And as I tighten it, the rings go inside. So that allows me to push the piston in with the rings inside, and once I take a halfway in, I'll take the tool off and the piston can be inserted right onto the crankshaft. All I'm going to do now is gently give it a tap. There you go. Piston is in the bore. So what we're going to do now is flip the block over and line up the conrod caps to the other side, and that will then mate the crankshaft and the conrods together. As you can see, we've already lined up all the other conrod caps. The one I just inserted now, the piston, this is the other side of the conrod right there. So all we have to do now is put the cap on the other side, torque it to spec, and that'll be the short block assembled. Short block meaning the block, the crankshaft, the pistons and the conrods, all torqued up and all fitted. Then we spin the engine back up again to the top where the cylinder heads go. We're going to put both cylinder heads on and then torque the headbolts down to spec, and that'll be the V built up for the engine. And then it's the other part of the building, which is all the ancillaries. So you got all the fuel lines, the breather pipes, supercharger, oil filter housing, basically everything that's attached to the engine, alternator, you name it. So this is the other side of the conrod cap. So if you look over here, we've got a brand new conrod bearing in here, and we've got some assembly lube here as well. This ensures a non-dry start operation. So at this point, what we're going to do is turn the crank manually, and there should be a smooth operation throughout, and that would mean that everything is okay. So if you watch, come over here now, you can see that the pistons coming up, and at this point when I'm turning the crank there shouldn't be no itch. It should be smooth all the way. If there's any slight bit of itch on that, it means there's something wrong. So this here goes in between the engine block and the cylinder head. And the purpose of this, if you come down here, see these seals? They're in charge of keeping the coolant and oil separate. So if you look at the block over here, you can see all these channels here. This is where the oil and the coolant passes. So if you come more down this way, obviously over here, the combustion happens and it's very, very hot when the engine is running. So coolant sits in these areas and cools it down. So if I place this gasket down, you've got the dowel pins, that's how you locate the position. You can see that they're all separate channels. So when people say head gasket failure, it's basically when the engine heats up too much and these seals over here, they wear out. And when they wear out, they no longer seal it as it should, and then the coolant and the oil start mixing. That's when you have to take the heads off and do the head gasket repair. Just to add to that as well, over here you have compression. And again, compression and the coolant passages, they're not supposed to mix. Once the gasket fails, the compression will then enter the coolant as well. That's why when you have the expansion tank, you'll notice that the water starts coming out. That's compression pushing the coolant out of the expansion tank from the compression. So that's it pretty much. Let's crack on. Cylinder head time. Same way with the head gasket. I have to locate the pins. Right. So now, as you can see, the head is now on the engine block. We're going to use head bolts to secure it on properly. Just going to hand tighten these, and then I'll get the torque wrench and torque these to spec. So the first stage is 20 Newton meters. I've set that on my torque wrench. What I'm going to do, slowly tighten it. Should only be a bit more. That's it. Next up, 90 degrees. So this is when it gets a bit more harder. The block's starting to move now. One more left. Done. 120. Next up, 120 degrees. It's getting tighter and tighter. All right, guys, we're back. New day today. So here you have the V8 engine assembly. Both the cylinder heads now attached to the block. As you can see, that makes a clear V. 8 cylinders, which makes a V8. So this part here is the most interesting part because it's the timing chain. It's how you time up a timing chain on a 5-litre V8 engine. As you can see, it's quite a complex system because you got chains down to the oil pump, the balance shaft, and you got 2 chains because it has 2 cylinder heads. They need to be timed up according to the crankshaft location and the camshaft. If not, the same thing will happen as it did when you bought the car, which is the valves and the pistons hit and they smash each other. So we've got to ensure that it's completely correct. It looks very, very complicated. As you can see, there's many chains going in different directions, but the whole idea of it is actually quite simple. So over here you got the camshafts, both of them, and at the end you have the camshaft adjusters. Now these have marks on them, as you can see right there, these 2 marks, and all that needs to happen is these chains need to be timed up according to those marks at every single point. So on the SVR you have about, I believe, 5 or 6 points. So both the camshafts will be 4. So look, as you can see, the line matches up there. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's the top timed up. Come down here, you got the timing chain tensioner, and on the tensioner itself, you can't even tell, but that dot there actually tells you that you need to time it up according to that. So this line and the dot lines up. You got another one on this. You have the fuel pump shaft. This also has a timing mark on it, and I got another one over here. However, what's important to mention at this point is it's all good doing that, but if the crankshaft is not in the correct place, the whole timing is out. And on this engine, you can actually be out by 180 degrees. Remember, a crankshaft turns in a circle, which is 360 degrees. So if it's not in the right place, you'll be 180 degrees out for timing, and more than likely, start the engine, the piston and valve will literally smash as soon as you start it. So you've got to get the timing right. It's very, very crucial. So on the SVR, to know how you timed it right, you go to the flywheel at the back. Over here you can see we've inserted a timing tool. This locks the crankshaft in the correct place. Once that's done, we can go ahead and do the front of the timing chain assembly, which we've already done now. So once the tool is attached to the flywheel and you've timed up the timing chains at the front, it's a very important step that needs to follow, which ensures that the engine is safe to be started. So this is the crankshaft here. It runs through the block. What you want to do is basically remove the timing tool so it's not locked anymore and spin the engine twice. When I say twice, 360 degrees, and if there's any sort of issues in that time, that means the engine hasn't been timed correctly. So we're going to demonstrate that right now. If there's any sort of issues with the timing, the engine will stop. And when I say stop, it means when the valves hit the pistons. So by the way, guys, this is exactly how the car runs when you start up a car. Usually it literally spins the exact same way. This is a manual engine turning, yeah? Remember when the car first came in, it was seized. It wouldn't turn. That's it. There you go. You can see the engine's turning. Look at this. You want to go all the way around twice. As you can see, the camshaft, the chain, flywheel, everything's moving in motion. Crankshaft as well. Look at that. There you go, guys. That's the engine fully timed up. Not long till we have this 5-litre supercharged engine start up for the first time. I'm very excited for that moment, guys. Let's get this cracking. Let's get this engine built back up. I'll give you guys a quick run through of what's going on. That's just a timing chain cover. It's like a plate that goes on. It's got a seal around it to stop oil passing out. We're then going to put the covers at the front, the rocker covers at the top, supercharger, then complete the engine assembly. Since the next part of this video is installing stuff like the timing chain cover, ancillaries, alternator, water pump, auxiliary belt, I'm going to put a time lapse on for you guys so you can just watch it in one way, and it's actually the same thing in reverse order from when we stripped the engine down the first time. Stay tuned and enjoy it, guys. Alright guys, it's time to get the Range Rover SVR back on the ramp finally, because we're going to throw the engine back in. Can't wait for this. Exciting times. It's been a long time coming. There you have it, ready to install the V8 engine back in. Can't wait for the car to start for the first time. We're not far off. Either today or tomorrow, depending on how things go, we're gonna put the engine right back in and go for the first start. Stay tuned. The 5-litre V8 supercharged engine fully assembled back up. As you can see, this is exactly how we had the engine when we first pulled it out from the car. Supercharger, ancillaries, all the belts and whatnot, all fitted. What we're gonna do next is attach the engine crane to the engine, remove the engine stand from here, and then lift it up and put it back onto the car. Come around here. There's 2 mounting points over there, one there and one there. That's where the engine will sit. We'll then use the engine mounts to secure the engine onto the chassis. Next up, we're going to attach all the fuel lines, the hoses and whatnot from the engine to the car. And after that, it's going to be go time. We're going to go for the first start. We have lift off, engine is in the air. Let's remove these bolts and then we can separate the stand from the engine. This is a 5-litre supercharged SVR. Who would have known that you're gonna have parts from a Ford? Let's go, guys. Big moment. Let's line this engine up. We gotta get a V8 in that area in there. Come around, I'll show you. So you got all of these pipes and stuff, sensors and stuff lying around. We're just gonna be careful when we're lowering it down so it doesn't damage anything in the process. Almost there, guys. Almost there. Okay. Yes, there you have it, guys. Engine has landed in the engine bay onto the mounts. So next up, we're gonna get the ramp to go up and secure the engine mounts with the bolts. So there's 4 in total, 2 in each side. And we can then go into doing the gearbox and followed by all the final pipeline for the fueling, and then I think that's it. Go for the start. Finally, the day's come. The SVR is back up in the air, engine back in. Now you have this massive gap in the middle of the car, and that is where the gearbox goes. Let's get the gearbox put back in and attach the prop shafts. Alright guys, so the engine is now finally back in the SVR, right where it came from. There's only one more thing to do now, and this is what we call the big moment, the first start. Is it gonna start up? Is there gonna be further problems? There's one more thing to do, let's do it. So because this is a fresh rebuild, it's very important to prime the engine first. Now what that means is to get the engine oil circulating from the bottom of the engine to the top. How we're gonna do that is basically press the start button, crank the engine. It might even start, but we're gonna cut it off straight away and do that about 3-4 times. That will ensure there's engine oil all around. Okay, let's go for it. Start and cut straight away. Oh my days. Loud, man. This car is loud. That was twice, so 2 more times we'll do it. Okay, 1 more prime. This time just leave it running, yeah? Guys, what do we have here? Engine started up, first time straight away, no problems whatsoever. What do we have? Washer fluid low, right tire pressure, we've got an engine light as well. I'm not going to be too worried about that just yet because that's going to be some sensors, and remember, when the engine has a rebuild, it's got everything unplugged, so you are going to get engine lights. We now need to scan the car for full codes and see what comes up, but yeah man, the car sounds perfect. It's running very, very good. Look at the idle. That's what you want to be seeing after a rebuild. You see that? It's not fluctuating, it's not going up and down, which is perfect, man. Look at this. We did it, guys. The Range Rover SVR is finally up and running, and we can hit the roads. Mad. Let me jump out. I was just gonna jump out, but I'm gonna start it again because that startup is so addictive, man. Sounds nuts. Mad. alarm's gone off. Alright, let's jump out. For those of you wondering why the SVR is so loud, it's because we haven't installed the exhaust system yet, so the catalyst, the full exhaust system is still not installed. The reason we do that is because with any rebuild, we do a test fit, so we put the engine in, put the gearbox on, do a first start, just make sure everything's running well, and then we start assembling all the final bits and pieces. It's a better way to do it instead of putting everything on and then finding out something's not right, something's gone wrong somewhere, we're gonna go back and forth again. But yeah, man, that's the SVR here, man. That's the part 3 done. We put the engine in and we're starting up for the first time. Very successful. It is Friday, 7 p.m. Gonna call it a night. And I'm back on Monday again to continue with part 4, where it's gonna get very, very interesting because I've got a few things to tell you about this car and what we're gonna do moving forward. But other than that, this is Nams from Boost Performance. Thank you very much for tuning in and I look forward to seeing you in part 4. Peace.